The screening of documentary KIVALINA by Fusion's co-founder and KIVALINA's producer and director, Gina Abatemarco.
Gina Abatemarco pursued her BFA in Film and Television from NYU Tisch School of the Arts. While at Tisch, as her thesis project in 2003, she and fellow student Emma Held founded the Fusion Film Festival. In her professional career, KIVALINA made its world premiere at the Bagnall Culinary Cinema last year and was broadcast on the Emmy Award-winning show America Reframe in collaboration with American Documentary. It has screened at Sheffield DocFest, Full Frame, and the American Film Festival in Wroclaw. She is dedicated to producing cinematic and character-driven work inspired by food, culture, and the human experience. Thank you, Gina, for allowing us to screen your film here tonight. After the screening, there will be a Q&A with Gina, moderated by documentary filmmaker and professor here at Tisch, David Bagnall. We are also offering a catered reception in the lobby after the Q&A.
Please enjoy KIVALINA.
It started out as a short film, right? Can you talk about how that started and where you started that short film and how it then grew into a feature length?
Yeah, again, this goes back to friendship. There's a filmmaker who's not here tonight named Jordana Maurer who went to NYU, and we did a program at the Berlinale called the Berlinale Talent Campus, which I recommend all the students here, young filmmakers or filmmakers in general, to apply to that. And we both fell in love with Berlin, and we made a pact that one of us would get this grant called the Berlin Today Award, and this town had a wall, a very disgusting seawall that is actually not in this cut, that was built and then washed away the day that it was at the ribbon cutting. So I felt like there was a connection there.
So the first time you went up there was in 2008 for that short film, is that right?
Yes.
And then how did you get the idea that you wanted to go back and continue and go for a full length?
After a short film?
Yeah.
Our project mentor on the when we made these films was Wim Wenders, and he's a filmmaker that I loved, and when we were getting our photo taken, I got the special mention, and he whispered in my ear and told me to keep going. That was one reason. The other reason is that I had no idea what it would mean to make a film like this. If I had known what this, I would never go back, but if I had known how long this would have taken or how this would change my life, I don't know if I would have done it. That said, I would never change this, but.
And how did you gain access? How did you form relationships with the villagers on the island, and how long did you spend with them? Who did you start with? How was that process for you?
Yeah. This is supposed to be a conversation about Verite filmmaking in the Arctic and what that means. And we've done so many things wrong making this movie, but I think one thing that we did right is that the first time we came to KIVALINA, which was about a 2.5-week trip, we didn't bring a camera. So it was never about capturing anything. It was just about spending time with people. And I heard that there was an elders council, so I made sure on my first trip to the island that I would sit and have a coffee or bring donuts and sit with all the elders first, and then they would send me to the next person and the next person. And so there's about 80 households, and I had donuts and coffee with everyone over two weeks, and just tried to make myself known, and played bingo and smoked cigarettes with people and cooked with people and invited people to the school to have me cook for them and just really hang out. So that was, unfortunately, it's hard when you really have to make a living out of this. You don't exactly have 2 weeks to go and hang out, but I think you should find a way to do that because I think that really sets the tone, is to not bring a camera when you first go.
And how many years of going back was there for the entire production?
In total, the film took 7 years to make, and we shot for 5, and we only ever had the money to shoot once a year, so I spent an entire year of my life scraping together money to go the next year, and always felt like the story was getting away from me, and that I was going to lose everything I had done the year before. But I didn't know the game when I started. I didn't know the funders, and I didn't know the story because I had never experienced a community like this before. So the film took me. Well, one of the things we were talking about outside is that one of the reasons that it took so long is because something you should definitely do if you're making a documentary is figure out, especially if it's in another culture that is not this culture, it's completely not this culture, is you should figure out what is the story that the community wants you to tell, and also what is the story that you're projecting on the community. And I shot for a long time maybe what the community wanted me to shoot, and I also shot for a long time what I wanted out of the community. And the film started to happen when we had the relationships and had the emotional experiences to start dropping that and just spend time with people and stop projecting on them. So the parts of this film that I like the most are the parts where we were just there, sort of letting the place come to us and interacting with the community in a really honest way that was was unforgettable for us, for sure.
Yeah, well, it definitely does have the greatest aspect of any observational documentary, which is what Ricky Leacock called the feeling of being there. And I think you really do get that throughout the entire film. You feel like you're just there with the villagers, experiencing the community, experiencing the people, experiencing the landscape, experiencing the trouble of it all. I'm going to pause on my questions and open it up for anybody have questions in the audience. Arnie.
Is that village on an island?
Yeah, it is. It's a barrier island in the northwest of Alaska, and ironically behind this barrier island there is endless amounts of land.
Why didn't they settle on the mainland?
They didn't settle on the mainland because it was convenient for a boat to stop on this island. It would have taken more maneuvering in shallower water to reach the mainland. And they, when you're invading the Arctic and you're invading the lives of indigenous people and people that have lived in a nomadic way, and your goal is to build a school to change them, you're not going to ask them any information. So this island was always a hunting camp. It was a beluga hunting camp, and everybody knew that this was a place that, like, with the storms, with the weather, would change and was unsafe. But they never asked, and it was built by foreigners who didn't know the land.
How far from the mainland?
There's the ocean, and then there's the island, and then there's a lagoon. And the lagoon is actually not that far from the
Is that what they
mainland.
kept calling the river?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can go upriver that way, yeah.
Who built it? Would you say not them?
The church, the Episcopal Church, built the school, and the Department of the Interior,
Do you know what
Bureau
year
of
that
Indian
was?
Affairs. 1905 is when
Say
they
that
built the
look
school.
right.
Have you gone back? Have you seen the film? Where they stand now? What's going on?
Yeah, unfortunately my cinematographer Zoe White couldn't be here. She's not an alum of NYU, but she's wonderful. And we went back in October and we screened the film for The Village. We yeah, we took over the gym and we hung a sheet, and Adam helped me plan that out because he's done it, and you just screen it like that, and it was really beautiful, and the film was interpreted by the village almost like a home movie, which was really interesting, and I'm really excited for the village to see the film outside of their own community and see other people's reaction to it, because I think when they see the outrage from an audience, depending on what the setting is, that will be really meaningful for them. But in their community, it's like, oh, there's Papa Oren, and look at Lucy, and oh my God, look at you. And so yeah, we did screen it. It was a really positive experience for us.
Can you tell us a bit about how you got from your last year at Tisch to where you are now?
Good question.
Yeah, this is my chance to thank Laszlo Santha for an article that I think we've talked about this over lunch maybe, but if you've taken Laszlo's class, if you've been lucky enough to take his class, he might have given you an article called On Directing by Ilya Kazan, and there's one line that really affected me in the article that says, if you want to be a director, you have to chance a shipwreck just to know the power of it. So I didn't leave Tisch wanting to immediately work in the industry, although actually I did. First I was Brian De Palma's assistant for a year, and I saved a lot of money doing that, and so I took all of that money and I went traveling because I wanted to live life. I wanted to have my heart broken. I wanted to meet people. I needed to learn and I needed to grow. And I didn't feel like I had anything to make films about, to tell you the truth, when I left Tisch. And I'm not sure I had anything really important to make films about when I was at Tisch, but I know that I needed to. Fusion is because we needed to actualize ourselves as female filmmakers and feel that we could do that we could step into that. So I went traveling and fell in love with the world, and then was able to receive this newspaper article about like a part of life ending and have it touch me. So I love that article. I still have it. Can't throw it out. It's very dusty, but I love it. Thank you, Laszlo.
Yeah, back there.
How, Gina, how did the villagers react to when you first proposed that you wanted to film them? And how long did it take you to get to that point to tell them?
To tell them.
That you wanted to film them and you wanted to do a documentary on them? How did that kind of happen?
So I was probably perceived as just like everybody else. And I wasn't asking anything of anyone at first. Like, I didn't really need to go into your home and, you know, and then, eventually I had the courage to try to, and I didn't fully achieve it, but I love Verite filmmaking. Observational filmmaking is what has affected me the most. And that's what I really wanted to do, but I didn't have the guts to do it. That's why there's interviews. And I didn't know how to plan a movie like that. And I didn't even know what this was about, because I had no experience in the indigenous world. I had no experience with this type of violence, you know, and this type of beauty. But it's always that hard phone call where you just pick up the phone to someone you've known for a couple of years and be like, I've got this really crazy idea. I'm totally changing my approach. Like, all that stuff that we did do, yeah, I'm not gonna use that. Actually, I want to invade your house and we're gonna be there all day. Just me and this other girl, you know, Zoe, and we're gonna mic you up. Is that okay? Like, do you mind? Does that hurt? And then you just keep like showing up every day. And thanking people. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with me. But it was just like a very awkward thing when we started to shoot in the houses, because it was the old woman who's cutting the caribou and then the family watching the Eskimo movie. It was actually, we invaded their houses for 2 years and shot almost exclusively with them, and then everything else that happened was just completely by accident and on the fly, because you're on an island in the middle of the Arctic and you have nowhere to go. But there wasn't enough material with just the two families to make it work. But spending time in their homes helped emotionally orient you to the rest of the material.
Can you talk a little bit about how you first started out with a larger crew and then decided to pare it down and get a more intimate setting with just the two-person crew?
Yeah, as my dad says, it's really important to have the right people on the bus. And the first year I didn't have the right crew. And it was 3 people's too many people. And so I decided to make the crew as small as possible, which meant that I had to face my fear of technology and learn how to be a sound mixer. And so I got lucky and I met Zoe, and I think it's very important to have a very sensitive, if you're not shooting yourself, I'm sure a lot of you guys are shooting yourself, but you have to work with sensitive people that are empathetic and care, and I didn't have that the first year in a cameraman, and I think that affected my first film. And also, I decided to run sound and have multiple wireless microphones on people, and because the village knows me so well and always wants to talk to me, it was great to have the mixer and have something to do and be able to hide. I really needed to stay hidden a lot of times when we were shooting in the homes, because people would just start to talk to me, but Zoe's much quieter and has a different disposition, so she was able to get away with more.
Yeah, right here.
Could you share with us more about the indigenous food culture and how the community is dealing with food scarcity there? I mean, like the footage was very jarring. Like I feel very nauseous a little bit, but you know what your experience was and how they're dealing with that.
Yeah, if you guys are, I come from a very food-centric family. Being at the table is really important to us, so I'm already interested in food, but I experienced the people of KIVALINA on multiple different levels, and when I felt that the community was most alive is when they're hunting. That's when this community is really healthy, because they're not having to deal with the rest of the world. They're just being themselves and interacting with their landscapes. So I knew that I needed to shoot that. I guess when you're shooting Verite style and you're watching Lucy cut up an animal every day for years, the blood doesn't bother you anymore. And I think what's even more, there are things that bother me, like clusters. Like if I see a cluster, I could have a seizure, like too many shapes, and I freak out, so I'm sorry if the blood bothered you guys. But I felt like it was important to show the food, because the first way you can take apart a culture is by taking apart their food ways. If you destroy their food culture, you destroy who they are, and certainly that's at play in this community. So we wanted to show the contrast. And the food is also an expression of that landscape, of the Arctic landscape. And I think it's worse to eat food that gives you diabetes and separates you from your family and makes you ill, so I felt like it was important to show that.
How much is climate change affecting their hunting and food gathering?
In a big way, same way that it's affecting our farmers here with the weather. So one year there was no sea ice, so there was no landscape for the seals to be. They come out around the ice, and it's so warm up there, and that one year recently, I think it was last year, there was no ice, so there was no seals, so nobody got a seal. And then the year before that, there was no caribou. And that was because of the weather, because there was no moss in the tundra, so there was no food, so their migration patterns changed. So it's getting harder and harder. Also, the ice is too thin to go hunting on the ice now, so it's difficult.
The footage of capturing the whale, and bringing the whale up onto the beach, that was their own footage? Somebody in the village had shot that? And
That was
how
the
did
last
you
whale.
come across that? Did they tell you they had that and they wanted to show it to you?
Yeah, that small scene is like condensed from 10 hours of everybody's VHS footage of that whale.
It was shot from multiple angles by multiple villagers.
By multiple different people, so that's also a level of trust. Like, can I borrow all of your VHS tapes and transfer them at night in the school?
So besides food, religion also you come back to several times in the film. Talk a bit about the importance of religion on the island.
I think for a lot of people watching this film, because we know what the church has done to a lot of cultures, it's hard to understand that the church is a big deal in that community, in that culture, and they're very spiritual people, and they don't feel the conflict really between the past and the present. The church is a place where they gather. There's a big music culture there of country gospel music, and there is one person on the island that is trying to reconcile with the Episcopal Church the history and have the Episcopal Church acknowledge, I don't know what the right word is, but I'm going to choose violence.
And it's Episcopals and Quakers as well,
Yeah,
right?
the Friends Church, yeah.
Over there.
If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw that two of the production assistants were actually two of the villagers there, or two of the kids there. Can you just talk about youth culture there, and kind of like education, and how you kind of interacted with all of that while you were there for several years?
Yeah, Kelly and Jerome, who watched the black and white Eskimo film, were a young couple that we met when they were 17, and we kind of fell in love with them. And it's all cut out, so much is lost, but this young man Jerome was extremely expressive, and he walked in front of our camera and just told us how life was one day. And that's when the movie really changed for me, because he revealed a frustration and inner life that I didn't really have access to until he just told me. And I think that's like the great moments of documentary film, is when you don't ask people to come talk to you and they just do, and they reveal their whole inner life. And he remained really expressive throughout the making of the film, and he's in the beginning, and he's the one who says, I just want to die. And he talks about suicide and the filth of the town. We continue to have a relationship with him, and still do to this day. So I was just really fascinated with the youth culture. Jerome let me into the emotional world of young men that want to be hunters, and that don't really have access to that anymore, because maybe they didn't have a father, or their father was dealing with addiction, or they never had the money to have the ammunition and the bullets. And so this idea of not being able to step into these roles that you were sort of brought up to revere, and all the pain around that. And just watching young people try to navigate the modern Arctic, basically, which is parts of this culture and parts of their indigenous culture, and how they somehow have to find a way to piece that together and stay whole at the same at the same time. I think we were just really sensitive to that. And also, we're shooting in the 24-hour sunlight, so for a lot of it, so the kids people don't sleep. So you have a lot of access to teenagers, and they'll tell, they are very, very open, and unfortunate, and it's very, very difficult to be a young person there. There's some youth that are in this film that are gone. So there's a lot of people in this film that are gone, which is really sad. So, but the youth are also resilient and amazing, and so I don't know how to work with youth. It's like you're just trying to get on their level and hang out and not be too judgmental. But it was Jerome that I had projected all my own ideas from this culture on him. When he said he wanted to be a pilot, I was like, oh great, cool, let's like make a film about how you go to pilot school. That's not appropriate for this culture. And he said a lot of things that he wanted to do, like things he wanted to reconcile in his life, and I just projected this narrative on him, and it wasn't appropriate, and that's something I will never do in a film again. I will not project what I think is without knowing more about life there.
Yeah, right here.
Gina, what do you think will happen to the village?
The physical village itself will eventually be gone. I mean, eventually that piece of land will wash away, and we'll remember it through photographs and footage and stories about when people lived right next to the ocean, because they're coastal people, but they are going to move inland. And right now they're living in a very simple landscape, and eventually when they do move, it will become more modern. Everything will be new. There'll be a new school, there'll be a new airport, a bigger store, and this place will be gone, and it will change, I think, the way people interact with each other. But the island will eventually wash away. It's about getting out of there before a disaster happens, and before it becomes completely inhospitable. It's already really difficult to live there. The dump is overflowing, people are getting sick, there's no room to build, there's nowhere to live, there's like 20 people in a house.
How will they get off the island if something big happens?
They won't. I mean, there's no helicopters, you can't bring anybody in that type of weather, and there's not enough boats to get everyone off the island, so
They've started to build a bridge, right?
they haven't started.
They
They're
haven't
trying
even
to raise
started
money
that
to
yet.
build a bridge to the mainland.
Is that the answer to the fact that the wall got washed away, now we're gonna build a bridge?
The bridge is in response to the school board putting millions of dollars towards a new school, and no one will invest anything on that island. So once they said 16 million for the new school, then it becomes about somehow building a road, and I don't know how people are gonna get their houses there.
All right, you said gone too, I just wanted to follow up on that. Some people are actually physically leaving, or did you also reference suicide, the one guy talked about?
The youth culture is dealing with suicide, and some people are leaving, but not so many. And that's a sad thing too, if people just start leaving, because it's not a town, it's a tribe, and everybody is family, and but there's also not a lot of ways to make a living there, to make money, and if you can't hunt, then you have to depend on money. So then you'll leave. A lot of people work at the mine that's nearby,
What kind of money?
the zinc mine.
Yeah, Arnie.
Why does the boy say there are no girls in our town?
They're related.
Where are the girls?
Well, everyone's grown up. People are related, but they're big extended families, and they've all known each other since they were babies, and I'm sure they wish there was a bigger pool of opportunity.
So it's not that there are no girls, it's that they're all
Related.
they're all related.
They're not all interrelated, but it's just like there's no new people. Like there's not going to be a new girl at school.
So they all
yeah.
know each other.
They have all known each other their whole lives.
No mystery.
No mystery. That's right. Too many backstories, you know.
Right here in the second row, please.
Hi, how did you know that your 7th year would be your last year? Was it a monetary restraint? Was it a creative, choice? Or something else?
Did everybody hear that?
No.
How did she know that her 7th year would be her final year?
I finally found the right editing partner that also believed in the same things that I believed in, and that I could have a creative conversation with and uphold certain ideas. And I didn't have the right editing partners in the beginning, and it was getting really intense to carry this type of a story for all of these years. And there were other things that I wanted to do with my life, and I just couldn't invest because I had to finish this documentary, and that was really difficult. But eventually I found the right editing partners, and I had a lot of really beautiful angels come into my life that wanted me to finish and had the right type of conversations with me. I highly recommend getting a consulting editor. If you can't hire the best editor, you can probably get the best editor to be a consulting editor. And so I really liked Anat Siddi, who did Detropia. I really liked her work, and she was kind enough to be my consulting editor. And I think she saw that I had gotten to a point where I couldn't move forward anymore. It's because I started editing the film, and she introduced me to the right person. And he was the right person because he was a hunter. He was like a spear fisherman. And actually, I just had to go on blind faith that this was the right guy. Even though when I first met him, I was like, who are you? But he was the right guy. So it was all about the right editing partners. But it's really hard to carry a film for this long. And I don't think they necessarily have to take this long. But I didn't know the game, and I didn't know... it just took a long time. And climate change fell out of fashion, and I couldn't fund it for a long time. Nobody wanted to do the climate change.
How long did the editing process itself take once you got the last editor who finished?
I had edited a cut of the movie, and most of the material was in there, and I think we had to do it in 6 weeks. And that was all the money that I had. That was it.
There's another question right here. Yeah.
Back to the food, Gina. From what you observed over the years, what percentage of the food that we saw is they hunt with, and then how much is brought in from off islands in place on their overall diet?
From household to household, it really varies, and it's bad. So yeah, it can be really, really bad. It can be really bad. The store burned down in the village, and it was a very small, manageable looking store. It was almost cute, even though it's called the Native Store. And when it burned down, they rebuilt it, and it's 5 times as big, and it's just all junk food. So the community would tell you themselves that they're at a dangerous, dangerous place in terms of keeping that subsistence Inupiaq culture alive, because the landscape is changing, because people, not everyone grew up with a really strong elder that would show you how to take an animal apart like that, because people are going into the workforce and it becomes about money in some ways. But at the same time, if I didn't think this was a really magical place that had all the keys to a connection with nature, I wouldn't have made this film. So it's at a dark place, but it's also, there's something really special and really real that's happening there. And I think the people of KIVALINA are really resilient, and I don't think they're gonna let this slip through their fingers despite Coca-Cola. And
As I say, what looks like, what's pretty apparent from that film is when they do hunt and when they do share, you see a lot of smiles and it's an up time, so it's, I thought you captured that pretty well.
they love it, yeah, they love it. It's true, they really love it. And so they love it.
Speaking of sharing, how much interaction does this village have with other indigenous peoples in the area?
There's a lot of sharing of resources. When they didn't get seals, someone would send in a big Rubbermaid container of seal meat or seal oil, and so there's really a culture of sharing resources there. Coastal people connect with people that live by the river, and they share different types of fish and berries, and it's all through food. I mean, the connections are all really through food, and it's beautiful.
Right here.
Quick question then. What was the most delicious thing you ate? Because I haven't eaten 80% of what I saw in the movie.
The most delicious thing that I ate was dried seal meat that is half dried and then boiled. It's the most delicious meat, and the berries are incredible, and there's wild potatoes and onions, and yeah. They're just like Italian people. I'm Italian American. They are driven by oil, like my family is driven by olive oil, and yeah, we're all the same, Adam. That's the thing.
It's all seal oil? They cook with
Seal oil, yeah. They just like vegetables are preserved in olive oil, they'll preserve vegetables and meat in seal oil as a preservative.
Is that like a banned oil here?
I've had it in New York, actually. I've had it. Someone smuggled some in. It lights your whole body on fire. It's really amazing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the back, yeah.
How does the blubber oil, how does she prepare that so that it keep her warm in the winter? They just melt it down?
Yeah, all those strips of blubber go into a bucket, and they put a top on it, and it's kept in the dark, and it just melts, and it renders, and it's not supposed to. Sunlight is bad, but I don't know how that happens, but it can last over a year. The seal oil, and it comes out at every meal. It's like salt and pepper and seal oil. Every meal it comes out. And it is really beautiful. It's really strong, and the food does something to you when you're in that environment, and it's really beautiful. And that was like such an awakening to realize that in the Arctic there's so many flavors, there's so much food, and then to see those foods show up in every culture you go to, whether you're in the desert or here, is really beautiful. Their wild potatoes are the same wild potatoes that people in the desert eat. Every culture has berries. The wild greens, it's all the same. It's just beautiful.
We've got time for one more question.
I guess my question is, where is Gina the filmmaker now, and are we seeing something in the future? And what it is?
Yeah, I'm working on a culinary show, and I'd like to go into television related to food yeah, I think a lot of the same narratives that are in this film about food and culture can be found in other cultures, and I'm very interested in my Italian culture, so yeah, I'll be pitching a series soon.
All right, Gina, thank you so much.